Hello, everyone. Danny here today, not to talk to you about an audiobook. Well, kind of talk to you about an audiobook, kind of not. See, instead of doing a review of a really good audiobook, I'm sharing with you a conversation I had with one of my absolute favorite authors. I had to break this conversation into multiple videos because the conversation was so good, went on for so long. To do it in one video would just be too long of a video. It'd be like sitting down for a movie instead of sitting down to watch a conversation. So this is going to be part one of my conversation with Philip C. Quaintrell. He is a self-published author. He is the author of the Terran Cycle and the Echo Saga, which I am just chomping at the bit for book 9 to come out on Audible. That is the final book in this series, and I can't wait for it to come out. Until then, though, I have this wonderful conversation with a wonderful author who, by the way, interesting fact, book sales for self-published authors, he's ranked in the top 1.8 percentile worldwide, which is truly amazing. Enjoy the conversation.
Finally, there we go. Wow, it's been a while coming, hasn't it? It's been a
while. Yeah, I wasn't sure.
couple of weeks.
Yeah, just one thing after another.
No kidding. And that's not with the time zone differences either.
Yeah, I know. I finally got my kids asleep in the evenings now, so I've got my evenings back, and I was isolating for a little while, and then that stopped, and then you had some things to go to, and it's just one thing after another.
Yeah, fortunately, and that's why Jonah's not here. Jonah was hoping to be here to get to talk to you as well, but with what happened last weekend, he ended up staying down south to visit some friends and stuff like that. So
great that he came back though. Was that a surprise, or did you know he was coming back?
It was, and it wasn't a surprise. He's been with the Marine Corps. They are supposed to pay to send him home, pay to ship his stuff, and he'd been on leave for a couple of days, and they just kept jerking him around. So finally, he was like, I'm buying my own ticket and paying to ship my stuff. Mom and Dad, I'm coming home. So it was a surprise, but an expected one, I guess. So, nice to have him home. Definitely.
And did I hear it right in your video? Is Jonah the one who first got you into the Echo Saga?
Oh, he may well be. Honestly, he may well be. I don't. Me and all three of my boys have such a history together with books that it's all kind of blurry as to who introduced who to which. But Jonah may well be, because he's been stationed in Japan, and with COVID and everything else on lockdown, he's been doing a lot more reading than the rest of us. With your series, he was the guy the day it came out on Kindle. He had it, and then 2 days later, he was bugging us. Hey, have you guys read this? Have you guys read this? I haven't. You guys read this? I want to talk to you about this book. You need to hurry up and read this book. Now, when my job said, well, I don't get to read, so I end up waiting for it to come out on Audible. That's what I end up.
Oh, yes. That was what I wanted to ask, actually. How far are you into the series then?
So I'm waiting for book 9. I've gone through the first 8 books.
That's good to know. I now know not to spoil anything.
It's okay. I have some questions to ask because, Jonah, Justin, Joshua, Caleb, they were like, oh, I want to know this. I want to know this. So if it ends up with a spoiler, I'll survive. I actually have the print version of the book. I just haven't had a chance to start reading yet.
Great.
Just yesterday accepted a new job. So I will be switching companies and starting a new job and at the end of the month, and hopefully have time to actually read. And then that will be the first book that I will sit down and read.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, that'd be amazing. The audio comes out on the 14th of September. So you could always do both if you wanted to. So I know some readers like to flip between audio and Kindle or paperback.
Well, and that's actually one of the reasons why I kind of wanted Jonah to be here. So then we could get it from the perspective of someone who's only read it and the perspective of someone who's only listened to it. and see what differences come in, because it is different. I've had book series that I loved the printed version of, and then when I went to the audio version, and typically this is a narrator issue, they pick a bad narrator, and it just ruins the audio version of it. I mean, the narrator is so important to an audio book.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which was one of the questions I had. How much influence do you have on the narration of the book?
I guess really none. When they first contacted me and we set everything up and signed the contracts and things, and they took on the production of the book, they didn't have a narrator attached to begin with. And then my liaison there just sent me an email one day, and she said, "Great news, we've got Stephen Brand attached to do what was at the time a trilogy." And I was very excited. I knew who Stephen Brand was. I'd seen him in film and TV, and I was, giddy that the idea that he was be the one reading my books. I knew he had a great voice. And I'm not an audio listener myself, so even though I knew how he sounded in films and things, I didn't actually know how he sounded reading a book. So I then went online and listened to some samples of his, and after that I thought, oh, he's perfect. I thought he's great.
He was great for the series, absolutely. So does he ever contact you and, hey, how do you want this name or this word, or does he just, that's all on him?
So there's a few different things that kind of happen, and things have progressed as time's gone on. And initially, and even now really, he has a liaison within Podium Audio, and I have a liaison. And so his liaison contacts me and says, are there any weird names or places that need breaking down so that Stephen knows how to pronounce them? And I give them a list of any new things that have come up per book so that he has an idea of how to spell them. And there's also a thing on my website now anyway, there's a whole section on my website where it breaks down all the names for you, so you can actually know exactly how they're pronounced. And Stephen knows about that as well, but I still send him things anyway. And then we actually got into contact with each other. If you look on my social media, you'll see, and it's on YouTube as well. I did this, what we're doing now. I did this with him last year.
Oh, I'll look that up then. That'll be cool.
Yeah, we should do. It's
I'll
great.
find it. I'll also put a link when I post this. I'll put a link down below to it.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. We're all in lockdown, and I gave him my email through Podium, and we just set up a Zoom call, and I had like a whole bunch of questions for him, and yeah, it was great. I was like a bit of a fanboy, just like asking him all these questions. It was great.
Kind of like I am now. I'm on the opposite end of that spectrum, getting to be the fan here. Yeah, we've had times when, like, Jonah, who does more of the reading, and we'll be discussing a book, and well, Vegan did this, and who's Vegan? Well, Vegan, and because he's reading it, and I'm just picking a name. I don't remember exactly which names, but there'll be names where, like, the way the narrator pronounces it and the way he pronounces it in his head when he's reading is different. And then we've got to figure out, okay, when we're talking this character, make sure we're on the same kind of a page with that. So that was.
So he says vegan. What do you hear? What do you say?
Well, that's how it's narrated in the book, is vegan.
Okay, I say vegan.
And that might be what he does, is vegan. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, it was. There's a couple of different names that are like that we end up.
Fantasy, isn't it? It's fantasy. There's always going to be 10 different ways to pronounce every name. And to be honest, it's kind of okay. I do have people say to me, how do you pronounce that? And I'm pretty flexible with it. I sort of say, it sounds however it sounds to you. Like, right. It sounds one way to me. It doesn't have to sound that way to you. It just has to, you just have to enjoy the name, be able to say it, move on. I'm not a big fan of names that trip people up while they're reading.
Yeah.
Every now and again they do pop up because, again, it's fantasy. But I do try to keep the names so that you can just sort of say it quite quickly and easily, and I'm not bothered how you decide you want to say it, really.
So I'm curious, because looking through your bio, you come from the medical field, which, if you had schooling, I would assume all your schooling is at the medical field, and then you started writing just to, like, relieve stress. Did you have any actual writing training or just from reading books?
No, I didn't do any. I did no training. I had no courses or lessons or anything like that. I obviously did English at school like everyone else. But yeah, I went to university and did nursing, so there was nothing really there in terms of writing fiction. And I don't know why I thought I could. And it's probably quite good that I didn't overthink that. But I one day just started writing, and I always say to anyone who wants to start writing, just start. Don't think about where the beginning is. Just start writing. And I ended up writing something like chapter 3, thinking it was chapter 1. So you just have to have fun with it. I had no sort of training at all, really. I did do
Now
this.
I'm going to have to go back and read chapter 3 to see what you started with now, because that's going to be kind of fascinating.
I'm talking about a different series. I'm talking about the Terran Cycle, which was.
Oh, you're talking about that. That's not one I've listened to yet or read yet, which I do want to get to that one, but I haven't yet.
Yeah, those were my first books. There's 4 of them. Intrinsic is the first one. That's where I started, and yeah, every book. If you were to read my books in order in which I wrote them, you will see my progression. It's kind of like learning on the job, I suppose.
Oh yeah, yeah. I would figure that. I see that. It's fun to find narrators that or authors that you really like and research if they had a previous pen name. I did this with another author, and I even posted a video because I found his first books that were literally his first books, and he wrote them under a different pen name because he knew he wanted to improve before he put his name to the book. And the books were still enjoyable, but you could see he's not nearly as polished and good as he is by the time the books are being released in his name.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just like that with me. I loved the Terran Cycle, and it's a great sci-fi blast. It's just a real action adventure. But then by the time I got to, I think I was halfway through writing book 2 in that series, and I just got like a bit of block, and I decided one day I would just start writing something different. It wasn't that I couldn't write, it was just that I couldn't seem to write that story. So I thought I'll just write something else for a little while, even if it's a short story. And that turned out to be the prologue to Rise of the Ranger.
So then, because I read that in your bio, and I thought that was absolutely fascinating that you started. I have my audio library. I have well over 500 books. I've been reading books since I don't remember a time when I wasn't into books. I grew up literally right next door to the library. And so I would get up, go over to the library, and the town I grew up in was not a good town. So I had a hard time finding people that I could hang around with that would be someone I would want to hang around with. So I spent a lot of time on books. And I've never read a series like this where an author throws in as many twists and turns and surprises as you've managed to throw in, and doesn't at some point in time throw a twist or something that just either loses the flow of the book, loses the integrity of the story, kind of contradicts something from the past, and you always just go, well, I'm enjoying this so much, I'm just going to ignore that right there. I haven't had that happen with this book. And you even said earlier when we were talking here that you thought this was going to be a trilogy, and it's kind of a trilogy of trilogies is kind of what it's turned into. How has all of that evolved then?
Well, I say a trilogy. It actually wasn't. It was only supposed to be one book.
Okay.
I said to my wife when I started writing it, I said, I'm just going to write one fantasy book, and that will be my contribution to the fantasy genre. And then I'll go back to science fiction, and that's where I'm going to stay. Just one book, and I'm done. And obviously, as you know now, it turned into 9, and I'm now very much into the fantasy genre. And it all happened very organically. This is probably the bit that will blow your mind the most. I didn't plan anything in the books. Nothing is planned.
Amazing.
There's no twist. There's no surprise. There's no all the things that make you go, what? I didn't plan any of them. They just happened organically, and I just went with it.
So maybe that's why it does such a good job of maintaining the integrity of the story, because it's not a plan. Hey, I want to throw this twist in. It's more like, oh, the story. I mean, I've read so many books that I've always thought it would be great to be a writer, and I've sat down to write, and it's a lot more work than I thought it would be. So, my Jonah, the son that was going to be here for the interview, he's actually written several short stories, and from the outside looking in, trying to be objective, I think he's actually a really good writer and does a good job. I don't have that ability that he has. I have to really work at it, and it becomes quite labor intensive for me, where he's like you. When he feels stressed, I'm going to write a story, and he sits down and he writes a story and gets it out that way. So you're planning on a series going back with Asher to kind of hit on his history, right?
Yes, I am writing that as we speak, actually. It's called The Ranger Archives, and that's going to be 3 books at the minute. Anyway, it's 3 books. I know that after the 3rd book, I know I am stopping and writing the next big epic fantasy series that will be in the same vein in terms of its scope as the Echo Saga.
Okay.
I think my loose plan that I can probably say that I'm hoping will probably happen is I imagine throughout my career I will probably sprinkle my releases with the Ranger Archives. So I'll give you 3 books over the next year or 2, and then I'll write the next big series. And then as a kind of like a break between the big epic series, I'll write these one-off kind of, Ranger Archive books where each book is its own story.
So are you going to do like an author where all of your fantasy stories are in the same world, or other authors to where they like to create multiple different worlds? So you're going to do the Ranger, and then you're going to have your big epic story. Is that going to be part of this same world, or is that going to be, or have you decided yet?
Yes, I know. I probably know what I'm doing for the next 10 years, maybe.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, so I've got these 3 books, which will be obviously about Asher. It's going back. I'm only going back like 14 years before Rise of the Ranger.
Okay.
And those 3 books won't cover all that time. They'll just cover the first few years, kind of thing. And then I'm not going to tell you what the title is yet of the next big series. I'll release that sort of a bit further down the line. Yeah. I do have a new big series title, and it will probably at the minute maybe about 6 books, but that is going to be set thousands of years in the past in Verda's universe. So okay. It will be the same universe that the same kind of right. The kind of like the laws of that book. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
It will be very comfortable. You'll recognize what you're reading. But
it makes me think of how like Duncan Hamilton does his books. He's had a couple of series to where we didn't even realize until we were partway into a new series, hey, this is actually the same world as the last series. It's just several thousand years earlier or several thousand years ahead.
Yeah, it will be like that. It'll be so far, from the books, about Atalan,
right?
The First Kingdom and all that, and that's like 10,000 years. It's going to be even further beyond that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're going to go back to the early Dragon Riders and the Janus, and the Andarans are going to finally make their appearance. And yeah, it's going to be big and epic and same scale, same kind of, world-ending event kind of thing as the Echo Saga. It's going to be big.
So are you going to approach that the same way you approached the Echo Saga, where from the sounds of our conversation so far, it doesn't sound like with the Echo Saga, you mapped it all out ahead of time. You just started telling the story and kind of let the story go where it wanted to go. do you have a map in mind, or is it more of I'm gonna let the story tell itself?
So at the minute, what I'm doing is I'm building a lot of the ancient backstory at the minute. So in my free time, that's what I'm doing, is I'm fleshing out the history and the myths and the legends and the religions of ancient Verda, you know, Eredor, and there's going to be some more land. The maps are getting a bit bigger because we're going west.
Okay.
We're leaving Ilion behind, and it's going to be, at the minute I'm trying to build on all that rather than thinking about what the story is about. I'm just building the world as it was thousands of years ago. And I have a few core characters that I know that I want to write as them. And I will probably, as I get nearer the time, start thinking about a spark, you know, like a starting point.
Mm-hmm.
And it will literally, I won't even really think much beyond that. I'll just start there, write as that character, see where that goes, move on to the next one. And that's kind of all I did with the Echo Saga, is to try and make it as organic as possible. I just let the characters make all the decisions for me. And
so how real do the characters and the world become to you then?
Yeah, very real. You know, when I'm writing, I will listen to music. They kind of, in the Echo Saga, they all have their own track that I know of, you know, that I listen to. And I will listen to that track as I sit down and I start thinking about what I'm writing. And that, as I'm listening to the track, I kind of slowly but surely start thinking like that character. And then that's it, really. I start writing, and I'm thinking like them. I'm making decisions like them. I'm always aware of like what their fears are and what their weaknesses are and what their strengths are. And to be honest, the hardest part is whenever you get to a chapter and there are 5 to 10 of the main characters or the really big characters, and they're all together in a room talking. Those are the headache chapters for me. Because you
gotta switch mindsets.
Yeah. So one that comes to mind is in book 3, when they're all, none of them have seen each other, and they're all around the table in book 3.
Uh-huh.
And they're all talking about what's happened and what's going to happen, what they need to do. And one character would say something, and then I had to stop and think what like 10 to 11 other people would think of that, because each of them has their own reaction, each of them has their own comment and opinion. Some are for, some are against, and I have to think about what all of them would think before I write the next piece of dialogue. Because sometimes I'll write the response from one character and then think, oh, actually, that other character is more likely to have said something first. So then you kind of, it's like you end up with lots of dialogue, and you have to kind of put it all together in the right order.
So I think the closest I can come to picturing that is when I play D&D. And I have to put myself in the mind of my character, and that's half the fun of the game, is not how would I react to this, but how would my character react to this. And if you're enjoying the game, you pick a character that's going to react completely different than you're going to react to a situation, because that's the whole fun of it. So
yes, exactly.
Yeah, that is absolutely fascinating then. So when you got your multiple storylines going on, so you've got Vegan, you've got a storyline with Asher, you've got the dwarves, you've got the Dragorn, and in the book it switches from following the Dragorn to following the dwarves and then it switches between storylines. When you're writing it, is that how you're writing it, or do you follow like this is going to be Vegan's story all the way through, then I'm going to go write the Dragorn, and then I'm going to interweave them?
No, I always write in the order you read it or listen to it. I don't jump ahead, really. I tend to, it's all about the pace, you see. So, the idea is that you're writing a page turner. Everything you write, you want to be a page turner.
Yeah.
And so you need to know that when you've ended one chapter, you need to know that you've ended it in such a way that they want to read what happens next. but also that then the next chapter, you know, if you've just had an action chapter, you then want your next chapter to sort of come down a bit. So you
So is this something you've learned through, I mean, how did you learn this? That's because that sounds like something that you would be taught in a writing class.
maybe it's just from reading, or, you know, I've had a lifetime of watching TV and film and reading, and fantasy and sci-fi is kind of where my head's always at. And I don't know, I guess I have that kind of confidence in what I know is a good story in terms of its pace. For me, I put a lot of books down when the pace kind of makes me put it down. You know, if the story just sort of goes, and then they sort of, they want you to hang on until that big bit at the end, but I can't always do that. And so I thought the whole point of me writing in the first place was to write something I wanted to read. So that's why I try not to have any boring side characters. I try to have core characters that all do something vital, and they're all interesting in their own way, and they're all doing something cool that you want to read about. I can't say where I learned it, only that's what I would want to read. I would want that, you know, you have that big, all the action, you know, all the climactic stuff, and then, a really interesting conversation that fleshes out something we've been thinking about for several books. And then it's like, a journey, and then another action piece. And it's all about the pace for me. That's one of the things that I'm very conscious of while I'm writing.
Well, you do a good job with it, because the books are very, very hard to put down. And I will listen to a book like while I'm at work. I've got some kind of mindless work where I can half focus on the book and half focus on what I'm doing. I can't listen to your series and do that because I miss too much. Otherwise, I need to give more focus than I can do. Like if I'm at the gym working out or doing something, you know, out mowing the lawn, I can listen to it. But work where I have to actually take some mental attention to what I'm doing, your books don't work for that, because then I end up going, I missed something. I could tell I wasn't paying enough attention, and I absolutely missed something. So now I need to go back and figure out, you know, what I missed, kind of a thing. Which a question, and this was one that Jonah had. He wanted to know, how hard was it to write a really engaging story with a character like the Crow, who can see the future, knows what everybody is going to do, basically seems like he has complete control over everything because of his knowledge. But you still got to keep the story engaging and keep our attention focused.
Yes, I know what you mean. Because the Crow tells you things, and you think, oh, well, I know that now, so it's not going to surprise me. It's not going to be a twist.
Yeah.
But I think you still are surprised when things do happen. It helped as a character. It helped with him that he was actually always casting a lot of doubt. You know, there was a lot of characters like Gideon and Inara who would often say things like, he can't see the future. Like, it's just not a thing someone can do. There's no magic that can do that.
But then they do something, and he'd have anticipated it, and it fit perfectly into his plan. He orchestrated it, you know. He burned this part of the letter because he saw enough of the future to know that, hey, I have to write this, burn this to get them to do this kind of a thing. It seems like that would be really hard to write and keep as good as it was.
The hardest part was knowing in my head that he can see the future. And so even though, you know, for like the sort of a lot of the books, it's very much sort of, can he see the future? Can he not? Is he telling the truth? Is he telling a lie? Or is there sort of like a hidden truth beneath the truth? The hardest part was that I don't plan anything. So he would say things like, you know, this is what's going to happen and this is what needs to happen. And I wouldn't know how I was going to get from A to B. Do you know what I mean? Like I didn't know how things would actually unravel the way he said they would. So two things would either happen. I would either write and it would just somehow naturally unfold exactly as he said it did. And And I guess maybe that's my subconscious writing it, maybe, just slightly on a different level. The other thing I did do from time to time with him was I actually went back in the book and then inserted a bit where he would say, this is going to happen. So I'd be writing, and as something unfolded, I could then go back and find the right point in the book where I could insert some dialogue for him that suggests that he knows that's going to happen.
Okay. That's interesting. It's just fascinating to me how you manage to have such a complex. I picture in my head this like wall covered with string. I'm going to connect this to this and this map and all of this, and it doesn't sound like it was like that at all from your point of view.
No, in fact, I don't even write things down anymore. I used to early on when I was working when I was a nurse. That covers books 1, 2, and half of 3. So I transitioned over to full-time writing in the middle of writing Relic of the Gods. And back then, I would write things down because half your brain is kind of at work, isn't it? So I didn't always have all the headspace. But nowadays, I don't really write anything down except for names or the odd place here and there that I think, I want to put that in somewhere. But I don't have, there's no diagrams, there's no graphs, there's no string attached to things. It all just kind of unfolded as it happened. Every sentence was completely new. And I found that was my best way of writing while I was writing the Terran Cycle. Because when you're early on writing a book, you get worried that you don't know how the book's going to end, or how long or how short it's going to be, and if there's going to be sequels, like how far does it go? So you end up planning ahead. And so I ended up writing out a lot of chapters in the Terran Cycle ahead of schedule. I'd write just like a paragraph for every chapter and have the whole thing planned out in my head. And then when the notebook was full and I could see where the series began and where the series ended and everything that came in between, I was confident that I then knew how to write this book because I could see from my notes that the whole story was there. I knew it was there. But what I found in writing it was that by the time I got to the end, I felt like there was no surprises for me. There was nothing new for me. I knew everything that was coming. Every time I got to a new chapter, all I had to do was look in my notebook. And even though I loved what I was writing, the experience of writing it wasn't like it has been for the Echo Saga, where I don't know what's going to happen next.
Interesting.
Yeah, if I know what's going to happen next, I get bored. I want to be just as surprised as you do.
So you're writing, and it's all as new to you as it is to us.
Yeah, I mean, there's some great scenes I can even think of where in book 4, do you remember, at the end, near the end, Vigon gives a speech to some soldiers as the orcs are invading. This is all spoilers, by the way. But as the orcs are invading, he gives a speech to the soldiers, and that's right at the end of book 4. And it was at that point, after he gave that speech, I stopped writing and I sat back, and my mind just went forward like a whole bunch of chapters and beats and books, and I went, Vigon's going to be the king.
Really?
I went, yes. I was like, that's so cool. And I don't know how he's going to be king. I don't know why he becomes king. He's the most unlikely person in the book to become king. He started off the book as a kind of an audience character, someone who could ask all the questions for the reader.
Right.
But by the end of the book, I was like, he's so much more. He's going to be this incredible king, and I don't know how I'm going to get there. And don't think about it too much. Just finish the book and move on to Kingdom of Bones and see what happens. And it did. It all just kind of happened naturally. I can only assume it's my subconscious at work.
Well, and see, that goes to the stories. When I talk about like the twists and turns in the books, they're dramatic enough that there are points in time in the book where you think this is the style of fantasy book that I'm listening to. You know, okay, Asher's going to be a monster killer. This is going to be a story about Asher, and it's just going to be him hunting and killing monsters. Nope, I'm completely wrong there. Okay, this is going to be a story about. Nope, I'm wrong there too. Wow, I have no clue. And by the time you get several books in, I'd even quit guessing. Okay, I'm not going to guess. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the ride, because as soon as I start guessing, there are some things that happen that like Asher, you know, bonding with the dragon. I did, oh, he's going to have Asher bond with the dragon, but it wasn't something that like a book earlier. It was something that like 5 minutes before, when he's doing the battle and all of a sudden his perception is starting to change. I'm like, hey, did he just bond with, I wonder if this just happened, which you say in one of your books, in like the author's notes, that was something you knew you wanted to have happen. You just did. Were there other things that you knew you wanted to have happen and you just didn't know when? Or,
well, with Asher, I you know, even starting book one, you know, these things didn't exist until I wrote them. So, for example, the Dragon and dragons in the world, they
right,
didn't exist until early on in Rise of the Ranger, where Galanor is stood on a building top on Dragon on the island, and he's talking to someone, and he then just mentions, you know, oh, this island used to have Dragon on, you know, this is where the dragons used to live, and that was all new to me. And I was suddenly like, oh, that's really cool. Actually, I quite like the idea that this world has dragon riders in it, but they're not here anymore. That's quite interesting. But then the story moved on, and I probably by the time I got to the end of book one, I thought, oh, I would love for Asher, for his, like, you know, his ultimate outcome, to sort of have the companionship of a dragon, because he's just not the kind of man you could be in a relationship with.
right.
You know, like, because he has that sort of
He's
thing
not
of,
like Nathaniel, where you're going to put him into a human kind of a relationship with someone.
yeah, he's just so broken. He's kind of like the human equivalent of Goliath. You know,
Uh-huh.
he's very damaged and broken, and he's had horrible things happen to him. And he has a little bit with Phelan early on, which really was just a way of him learning that there was a way to have companionship with someone, to be closer to an individual, but it could never work for him to be in a
Right.
relationship. And I thought, I'd love for him to find a dragon, but I had no idea how that was going to work. And as the books went on, it seemed less and less likely. And I thought maybe, you know, in books 4 and 5, where he's with Goliath, sort of against his will, I thought maybe that would be it. That was all he was ever going to get. And you know how you just said you only twigged 5 minutes beforehand when you entered the chamber and he starts to get a bit.
Right. Yeah.
That was the same for me. As that happened, I was like, it's happening. You know what I mean? I was like, it's happening. This is it. It's finally going to happen after 8 books. The thing I wanted back in book 1 has organically happened, and I didn't see it coming, because I didn't know there were eggs in that chamber until they got there.
So when you said in your author's notes that was something that you had wanted to have happen, you literally mean like from the outside as a
reader, almost.
As a reader, I wanted this to happen, not as the author. I was hoping this would happen, but
yeah,
didn't know it was going to happen, kind of a thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
I took that to mean that, hey, as the author, I wanted this to happen. I just didn't know where I was going to make it happen. So
no, it just happened. It happened completely organically, and that's kind of how I like it. And that was the fun bit for me. You know, there was another like fist pump moment where I just thought it's happening, and it happened exactly as I wanted it to. And you know, yeah, it was exactly what I wanted.
So then you've got to have favorite and least. Do you have a character that's your favorite and a character that you like really don't like?
Favorite is probably, I'm really torn between Doran and Asher. I mean, Doran is so fun to write. I get to be so carefree when I'm writing
Right.
as him. Because
Doran's my favorite. He's
okay.
Asher would be a second, but
Yeah.
Doran's my favorite. I'm kind of a dwarf nut, so I play Blood Bowl and I play a dwarf team, and I don't know if it's a game you're familiar with, but it's.
I know of it. I've not played it, but a friend of mine has that. He plays
Okay, yeah, I play a chaos dwarf team. Dwarves have always been my favorite, so he's my
great.
favorite.
Yeah, they're in the fantasy genre. They are these really, they are very hard exterior beings. They're very rugged and tough, and they just say whatever they think, but they often they have these like hearts of gold kind of thing, and that was what I really wanted for Doran. Was I wanted him to have this really warm heart. Just it was encased inside this early ranger, dwarf who had this, who'd had decades of war, on the dwarf side of things. And
and has that loyalty to where he's the guy that, all right, I got to go, fight that dragon to save my friend. I'm probably going to die. I'm going to go fight that dragon to save my friend. And if I die, hey, that's okay. I don't care.
And so that was,
I'm probably going to kill it while I die at the same time because I'm a dwarf and that's what dwarves do. We, you don't want to mess with us.
Yeah. And he was another character who, again, I was really excited in book 4 when you learn of his origins. When they're in the Vengoran Mountains, and they call him Prince in the tunnels, and I think it's Raina and Nathaniel. They're like Prince, and it was me. I was the one who was going Prince.
I was about to say. So from what you've told me, you had to have been just as surprised at that point.
Yeah. They called him Prince. I realized that I say they, and it was me who wrote it.
Right. But in your mind, it was them. Yeah, I get that.
In my mind, it was like they wrote Prince, and I was more like Raina and Nathaniel, who was just shocked that this ranger that they'd known for years was a prince in Denaheim, and so from there on, I was very excited writing him in as a point of view character because I didn't know why why he was a prince and not a prince anymore, and what he'd come from, and he just really blew up from there. He was a bit of a side character in 2 and 3, but by the time I got to the end of 3, I knew I loved him so much that he had to be a point of view character.
All right. I hope you really enjoyed that first part of our conversation together. I will provide a link down below for Mr. Quaintrell's conversation with Stephen Rand. If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you like my channel, subscribe, turn on notifications, questions, comments, feedback. It's what the comment section is for. Put them in there. But no matter what else you do today, make sure that today you listen to at least one really good audiobook. Oh, and do I ever recommend the Echo Saga by Philip C. Quaintrell. Thank you.